Hello, I'm Congressman Alan Lowenthal, and I'm going to be your host on this edition of Conversation with an Expert. Our topic today is the Senate filibuster. What it is, what it does, and what its future might be. Our expert today is Dr. Ringel, professor in the Political Science Department at Cal State Long Beach, where he teaches public and constitutional law. He's also published in the areas of law as well as media and politics. Before coming to CSULB, he served as a legislative aide in the Maryland House of Delegates and taught at the United States Naval Academy. Today, Dr. Ringel runs the CSULB Judicial Internship Program, and as director of the CSULB Moot Court since 2006, that's where I met Dr. Ringel.
That's exactly right.
He has led CSULB Moot Court teams to both regional and national championships. Dr. Ringel is also a founder of the California Classic Moot Court Tournament, and he serves on the executive board of the American Collegiate Moot Association. In recognition of his outstanding work for CSULB's Moot Court and other law-related courses, Dr. Ringel has been the recipient of CSULB's prestigious John and Phyllis Jung Faculty Award. I served as John Jung was a colleague of mine when I was in the psychology department, and Phyllis Jung was a wonderful human being and close friend. Welcome, Dr. Ringel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, then I'm going to go right to the questions.
Okay.
Dr. Ringel, can you give us a quick definition of what the Senate filibuster is?
The Senate filibuster is a parliamentary tactic whereby senators can delay a vote on legislation indefinitely. It's sometimes called talking a bill to death.
How does it work? How does the Senate filibuster work?
Well, Congressman, the Senate has, unlike the House, the Senate really has no mechanism to have a simple majority agree to go ahead and vote. So the Senate uses what are called unanimous consent agreements, which are exactly what they sound like. And that's what I always tell my students. They are an agreement that every member of the Senate who's present has to agree with. So there'll be a unanimous consent agreement to go ahead and vote on a bill. And when it's time to vote, if a member or more than one senator objects, then the Senate can't vote. And that's basically a filibuster. So a filibuster is when enough senators object to the unanimous consent agreement. And there's two types of filibusters. The terms that are sometimes used are, well, to be really simple, the painful version or the non-painful version. And if you'd like, I can explain how each of those works.
I would like.
Okay, thank you. Under the painful version, which was probably what our viewers are most familiar with, especially if they've seen it depicted in movies, members actually have to be at the Senate on the floor, standing, speaking. They don't have to speak about the bill. They could read, in the 1960s, senators from Louisiana read recipes for Cajun cooking into the record. And Senator Thurman read every phone book, as I recall, in the United States into the record. But they have to be standing and speaking. They're limited in, they can't eat on the floor. They may be limited in what they can drink, whether there's, rest breaks. And filibusters can go on for a long period of time, days on end. In the 1970s, the Senate changed this because that was proving fairly inefficient. And it went to a less painful, again, for lack of better expression, method where senators simply indicate, if enough senators indicate that they plan to filibuster, then the majority leader basically doesn't call the bill up for a vote. And this was more efficient for a while because you saved those endless hours of somebody talking about, let's face it, nothing. But now it's really just become too easy for senators to filibuster. And I think that's what a lot of the concern is. And it's gotten out of hand.
Well, what's the history of the filibuster? Have we always had the filibuster?
No, we have not. The filibuster is really accidental. The framers never mentioned it in the Constitution. I don't believe there's any reflection of it in any of the ratification debates, in Madison's debates or any of the state debates. In fact, the original Senate rules had a procedure as the House, where you served, does, to call the question and to cut off debate. In 1805, Vice President was talking to a few senators, and he said that, look, I think it's a bit redundant that in the House and the Senate, you vote on a bill, and then you vote on the bill. And he said that in his view, that was unnecessary. And the Senate, really without realizing what it was doing, I don't mean that as a criticism, but unintended consequences happen sometimes. 1806, the Senate took out the ability for a simple majority to vote, to go ahead and vote. And senators eventually figured out that this meant they could just keep talking. The first filibuster recorded that I'm aware of was 1825. Senator Randolph from Virginia, a Southerner, filibustered a bill that he believed would favor the New England states. And that's a consistent trend. Not that only Southern senators filibuster, but I believe over half perhaps have been involved with Southern senators often filibustering, involving matters related to either slavery or civil rights. In 1917, the Senate revised its rules. It adopted Rule 22. Under Rule 22, which was really urged by then President Wilson, if 2/3 of the Senate would agree to support something called cloture, that would shut off debate. In the 1970s, the Senate, as I recall, the 1970s, the Senate reduced that from a 2/3 vote to 60 senators, 3/5. And that's really where we are today. There are some exceptions that were also adopted in the 1970s, such as the reconciliation, the budget reconciliation. So that's, as I said, that's a short history, and that's how we got here.
You know, Dr. Ringel, I often hear the filibuster when people try to attempt to defend it, that the filibuster is really there to promote bipartisanship. Is there any history to this? Is there any reason to believe that the filibuster actually promotes bipartisanship?
Well, in theory, it could, and it likely once did, but American politics has really changed. We are much more divided than we used to be, and the Senate really reflects that. James Madison had famously written that government is the greatest reflection of human nature. Voters today seem to, and I'm generalizing a bit, but voters today seem to prefer candidates who would rather be right than compromise. And they punish those who compromise, those who would agree with the other side on matters. I think you see that in both the House and Senate today. If that wasn't the case, then I think you could see you'd see more bipartisanship in general. And maybe the filibuster would mean that the Senate, which is said to be the more moderate body, would have to come together because there's not 60 votes for something. And rather than the matter dying, they would work out a compromise. But it doesn't seem to me that the two sides, from what I can tell, really trust each other, and it's just not happening.
What's the nuclear option?
So under the nuclear option, it's a way in which the Senate can change the rules once the Senate's 2-year session has started. At the beginning of each term or each 2-year cycle, the Senate adopts new rules. Under the nuclear option, a member can ask the presiding officer, who is usually a senator, a member or more than one member can suggest that the rules are being abused and can ask for the presiding officer to make a ruling on that. So for instance, Mr. President, I believe that the filibuster is being abused, and I suggest that we change something about the filibuster. And if the ranking member of the Senate, then the presiding officer, he or she issues a ruling, which then by simple majority, exempt from a filibuster, the Senate then votes to either support that ruling or overturn that ruling. And to my knowledge, this has happened at least twice in recent years. 2013, the Republicans were filibustering about 20, as I recall, judicial nominations by President Obama, and for over a month had been filibustering the nomination to be for the Secretary of Defense. And the Democrats changed the rules to only allow a filibuster for Supreme Court nominations, but to get rid of it for other nominations. And then in 2017, the Republicans changed the rules using the nuclear option to not allow the Democrats to filibuster then Judge, now Justice Gorsuch's nomination. So that's the nuclear option. It's a way, again, to change the rules once the game has started, so to speak.
Well, you know, there's a lot of talk now on Capitol Hill about either abolishing the filibuster or reforming once more the Senate filibuster. A couple of questions that I just kind of think would be important is to ask you, what might a reform of the filibuster look like? And what are the implications of just doing away with the filibuster?
So I'll answer your first question first, if that's all right. In terms of what a reform might look like, there's any number of avenues that could be taken. I'll suggest 4, if that's all right. One would be to reinstate the rule that the Senate by simple majority can, this is the rule that was taken out in 1806, the Senate by simple majority could go ahead and vote. And that would basically be getting rid of the filibuster completely. And it could also be done that they could make exceptions if they wanted to. So it could be that it takes a simple majority, except in the case of this, or except in the case of that. Another possibility would be to limit the number of filibusters, maybe that a senator could initiate, or that could occur, or that the party could initiate, whatever form that would take per session. A third possibility would be, let's say that, and this is something, by the way, that my students suggested. We had a class topic similar to this a few weeks ago. And some of my students suggested, well, let's take cloture down to 55 or 51 votes. If you made it easier to invoke cloture, it's harder to filibuster. And then the fourth possibility that I would suggest, and this has gotten some play on Capitol Hill over in the Senate, is go back to the painful approach, the way it was when President Biden first joined the Senate. Where they have to actually be actively filibustering, not at home having dinner, not back in their state, but actually there on the floor of the Senate filibustering, doing it the old-fashioned way. So those are 4 possibilities. With respect to the implications, I guess it depends on who you are. If you're the majority, I think the question is what happens if you're in the minority? If you get rid of it, are the short-term gains, and they may be really important gains, whatever the legislation is. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it might not be very important legislation passed. In the long run, every 2 years, the Senate's reelected, a third of the Senate runs for reelection, and you could find yourself in the minority, and then you really would wish you could still filibuster. For the Democrats, had they not gotten rid of had they not invoked the nuclear option in 2013, we may not have the same 3 justices on the Supreme Court who Democrats overwhelmingly voted against. So they might want to, one might think about that as an implication. For really another possible way to think about it, and I'm really now thinking about your voters and everybody else's voters, the American people, they might actually really feel, they might be very satisfied because they might feel government can get work done. And they might see the government as getting things passed, and that might actually raise public satisfaction with the government. And it would be easier, I would think, for voters to figure out who to give credit to and who to blame. Because if things are not passing and there's no filibuster in the Senate, then that's a different issue than always the one side blaming the other for filibustering. So I think those are a couple implications. There certainly could be others, I guess I don't really know how to end this. I'm sorry.
All right, we're going to come back and ask.
I was starting to ask if you wanted to suggest any, but I realized that you're supposed to be asking the questions.
Right. Well, let me tell you then how I feel. Before I have one more question.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
I want to ask you. Don't be sorry. I think you've raised an issue. Where am I? What do I believe? What can I add to this conversation? So, I'm asking the question. I think it's important that I state what I believe and where I am. First of all, I don't think the founders had this in mind when they drafted the Constitution. That where we are today, the inability to get anything taken up a very little taken up in the Senate that the House passes.
Congressman, if I could add to that, I agree with you completely. Just in support of that. The Articles of Confederation, under that, nothing, I emphasize nothing was able to get passed. They got rid of the articles to get things done. They didn't get rid of the articles to then then put a filibuster in place to then ensure that nothing would get done. So, you are, in my opinion, absolutely correct. In the history,
and you're right, nothing is getting done now. And I believe the filibuster hinders the process of good governance. It allows a small minority of senators, even a single senator at times, to thwart the will of the Senate majority, but also the will of the majority in the House. I personally believe the filibuster is undemocratic and should be abolished. So that's where I am. And if I was a senator, that's where I would stand. I think it is time to go to really let the majority rule again. But I have to ask, whatever that majority is, and I personally think we'd see more bipartisanship if the filibuster was gone. That's just me, because I think there's 3 to 5 Republicans now that would vote with Democrats if there was not the vote. But now when you need 60 votes, it's just impossible to get any kind of bipartisanship. So that's where I am.
They're not going to fall on their sword for the Democrats if the Democrats can't get to 60 votes. They'll get killed by their voters. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. They're not going to do that. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think? I've told you what I think. I would get rid of it. But what do you think is going to happen to the filibuster in the future? You've given us some options. What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think anything's going to happen this Senate term. And the reason I don't is, I don't think anything in terms of large reforms, because I don't think that in a body that is 50-50, that the Democrats are going to get the votes to do that. I think that there would be support for going back to the old-fashioned way. I think that's an easier solution. I do think that if the Democrats expand their majority, and I'm presuming the Democrats are the party that wants to get rid of the filibuster.
You're right. They are the party.
I think if the Democrats expanded their majority but didn't hit 60, then I think that where they didn't need to hold on to all of their senators, then I think you could see the nuclear option to make more significant reforms to it, or to add the number of times you could use the budget reconciliation mechanism, or how you can use it. So I'm a bit pessimistic about this Senate, and it's just because of the numbers.
Well, thank you. That was great. I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me and to my constituents about this very, very important topic. You've given us a lot to think about. You've laid out where we are, how we got here, and what you see as the options that are before us. And to everyone that's watching this, if you'd like to do further reading on your own about this topic, I'm going to include a link in the description below to the United States Senate website on the filibuster, which offers a historical overview of the filibuster, some highlights of its use, and further resources to explore the topic, including links to official reports by the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service. Thank you again, Dr. Ringel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.